Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today let's talk about how to start a Tau army in 10th edition of Warhammer 40k. As always, I would like to mention that this video is based on my point of view, based on my own experience. Because of this, if you have a different opinion or you think that there's a better way to start a Tau Empire army, please let me know in the comments. As usual, to make this video much easier to follow, we can divide it into several parts. So first, we can start talking about the combat patrol, because of course, this is supposed to be the best possible way to start a new army in Warhammer 40k, so we will discuss that for sure. And then we can talk about the Codex, where we can find all the rules, the ways to play this army in game, and a lot of cool stuff about the lore of the Tau Empire. With the Codex, we are also going to talk about the different ways to play this army and which kind of miniatures we should aim to get depending on how we want to play it. Finally, at the end of the video, I will just share a lot of opinions and we can talk about the Tau Empire and such, but let's leave that for the end. Let's talk about the combat patrol. If we get this combat patrol, we are getting one Tau commander in Enforcer Battlesuit that we can assemble also as a Tau commander in Cold Star Battlesuit. Then we have a unit of 10 Pathfinders. Then we have a unit of 10 Breachers that we can assemble as a strike team as well. And we finish this combat patrol with a Devilfish that is a transport tank. I already made a video talking about this combat patrol when it was officially announced. Just in case that you want to hear more about it, I'm going to leave the link to that video in the description. But for sure I can say that me personally, I like this combat patrol. I do think that this is a solid start for a new player. It is true that it's not a perfect combat patrol because it could be much more interesting for new players and already existing players. But if we consider combat patrols as a way to start a new army, I think that the selection of units is quite nice. And I will always praise combat patrols that you can get twice, because in this specific case, as I mentioned previously with the units, we have the breachers that we can assemble as different units. Then we have the commander that we can get the same one and have two different types of commander with different battlesuits. That's always nice. Pathfinders, they are great. And then we have a Devilfish tank that it's always nice because Tau infantry by itself, it's quite vulnerable. It's not the most resistant unit in the Codex or in the game. So it's quite nice to have this kind of tanks to carry them through the battlefield. No matter what army we want to start, I think that this combat patrol can suit that army. But with the combat patrols, it is always the same. Here we have a box, we have 4 different units, and we are going to get them cheaper in this box rather than buying them individually. So if we want every single unit in this box, we are going to be saving money. If we get this box without wanting those miniatures, then we are not going to be making a good deal. Obviously, at the end of the day, this is just my opinion, and even if I do consider that this is a good start for a new player to start a new army, I don't know what kind of new army you want to start, because for example, if you are thinking about a Tau army and you think about completely different type of units, or you want to have a different vibe and you don't want anything here, of course that will depend on what we want. With all of this being said, let's stop talking about the combat patrol for now. Let's talk about the Tau Codex, because of course if we want to play Tau during some point of 10th edition, we should consider to get the Codex, because in the Codex we have the army rule, we have all the detachments, we have the different units that we can have, and lore for the Tau Empire. So it's something that we are going to consider getting at some point. Of course, I have heard that this information can be found online on different websites. I don't know about that, but for sure you can check on the internet. It is important to mention as well that the point where we can get all the updated information in an official way is the Warhammer 40k app, and to unlock all the town content in that app, we have to have the Codex. So even if the Codex can work as a reference, in the app is where we are going to find all the information up to date. Okay, now let's talk about the different detachments and ways to play the Tau Empire. As usual, I'm not going to be too specific about this. I'm not going to mention every single enhancement or stratagem, no, because this is supposed to be a video about how to start the army, not how to play it. That's why I want to focus in the playstyle rather than all the specific rules that are inside of the game. And maybe at some point in the future I would like to talk about the actual gameplay and this kind of stuff more specific, but for now let's keep it a little bit more simple. Okay, let's talk about the greater good, the army rule for the Tau Empire, that actually it's a little bit complex to understand. I have seen in the Codex that there's like a super nice drawing that explains this quite nicely, but I will do my best, okay? In the Tau Empire we can have units working in pairs. This means that we are going to have an observer unit and a guided unit. So the observer unit can mark one enemy unit that is going to be considered as spotted. That means that in our shooting phase, when this guided unit is being guided towards that spot unit, it will have a +1 to hit. And if the observer unit has the marker light keyword, this unit, when decides to shoot, will have a +1 to hit, and aside from that, those range attacks will ignore cover as well. So it's a quite complex one because you really have to think about it. It's not a straightforward one, and that's good. And of course, at this point, we also have to mention that if this guided unit decides to shoot something that it's not its spot enemy unit, then they will have a -1 to hit. So it's a quite complex one because you really need to know what you are doing. At this point, I would like to mention as well that the 2 infantry units that we get in the combat patrol, the pathfinders and either the breachers or strike team, all of them, they have the marker light keyword. That's why I like so much the combat patrol for starting a new army. There are 4 different detachments in the Tau Codex, so let's start with Kauyon, the Patient Hunter. This detachment will make all of our ranged weapons to have the Sustain Hits 1 ability. As a reminder, that means that if a ranged weapon scores a critical hit, we will have an extra hit. And of course, if we are being guided against one enemy unit, those ranged weapons will have a Sustained Hits 2 ability against that specific enemy unit. Before I start talking about units that will suit this specific detachment or about the playstyle of this specific detachment, I would like to talk about the second detachment first, Mont Ka, and this is a much more aggressive one. Here, during the first 3 rounds, all the ranged weapons in our army will have the lethal hits ability. This means that if we score a 6 when we hit with the weapon, that hit will automatically wound the enemy unit. And aside from that, if our unit is being guided, those ranged weapons will also have the assault keyword against that enemy unit, which means that we can advance and then shoot. As you can see, here we have 2 different detachments, but they are not that different in terms of both of them. They make a good use of the army rule of the Tau Empire. Both of them, they are completely focused into ranged weapons because of course Tau is a shooting army and we can see that clearly here. The first one is encouraging us to be more passive in terms of we have our big advantage of the detachment in the last 3 rounds, which means that during the first 2 we are not going to expose our army because we want to use the big benefit later, and we are going to be more patient and passive in terms of we are going to let the enemy get close to us, so later we are going to try to shoot everything that we have of them, get control of the table and score as much points as possible. So this is a totally legit playstyle for the Tau. But the second detachment is much more aggressive. This one we have the benefit during the first 3 rounds. So we are going to completely attack, and we want to shoot as much as possible during the first 3 rounds because we want to deal with the enemy at that point. We are going to expose much more our army, but we are going to be dealing probably more damage. So we have 2 different playstyles, but we are using kinda the same units. And I say that we are using kinda the same units because, for example, the combat patrol works fine for both of these detachments. Battlesuits, the crisis battlesuits or other battlesuits, they will work nicely in these detachments. Tanks, they will work nicely in these detachments. Everything that we want to get, it's going to work nicely in these detachments because these are the most generic ones. So if we want to, let's say, focus into these 2 types of playstyle, I'm not going to say to you, you have to get this specific unit or these detachments are benefiting these units. Of course, we want to get shooting units, but it's Tau Empire. Most of the units are mostly shooting ones. So of course, we are going to be aiming for those ones. But as I said, mostly all the range of the Tau Empire suits these detachments. Basically, if I had to recommend units for these specific detachments, I will mention the ones that have the marker light keyword. We should have those and then combine them with whatever we want. A quick reminder that the units that have this keyword are the Pathfinder team, the Skyray tank, then we also have the Strike team and the Breachers. And those infantry units that I just mentioned, we can have them from the combat patrol. So as I was saying, that's why I like the combat patrol, because to play Tau properly, it's nice to have these specific units, and we can get them in the combat patrol at a discounted price. So that's why I said that the combat patrol is specifically a good one for these 2 types of gameplay. Aside from that, we also have characters that have this keyword, but with the characters, I think that it's much better if you choose the ones that you like the most, because they are going to work anyway here. As I said, for these detachments, both of them, we can have the units that will suit nicely the army rule, those ones that will have this specific keyword, and we can combine that with whatever that we want. If we want to have like a lot of tanks, we can go for that. If we want to have a lot of battle suits plus the infantry things and maybe some tank, maybe something else, we can also go for that. I mean, these detachments are quite generic, so everything that we want to play here, it will work. The next detachment that I would like to talk about is Retaliation Cadre. This one is purely focused into battle suits. This is the first detachment that is purely focused into one specific type of unit. The detachment rule makes that every time that a Tau battlesuit and only Tau battlesuits makes a ranged attack against an enemy unit that is within 12 inches, that attack will get +1 to the strength. Aside from that, if the enemy unit is within 6 inches, aside from the +1 to the strength, we also get +1 to the armor penetration. Aside from that, every single stratagem, every single enhancement, everything is focused into Tau battlesuits. And I don't have to mention which ones are the Tau battlesuits, because if you go, for example, to the Warhammer store online and you check the Tau range, you can clearly see that the battlesuits are battlesuits. So it's quite easy, it's quite intuitive. So if you want to have like a full force of battlesuits, maybe again with some infantry or something else to fill the gaps and have more things than just pure battlesuits, because of course we are going to be using battlesuits here for the damage and to deal with the enemies, but we still need units that will have to fit that role of screening, doing objectives or doing some missions, or they are going to be like some trade unit that we will put there. So we still need more things, but if we want to focus purely on battlesuits and have at least half of our army being battlesuits, this is the perfect detachment. The last detachment that we are going to talk about is the Kroot hunting pack, and of course this is purely focused into the Kroot units of the Tau range. All the stratagems, all the enhancements and the detachment rule, everything is purely focused into Kroot units. The army rule here is divided into two, okay? First, every Kroot miniature will have a 6+ invulnerable save against range attacks and a 5+ invulnerable save against melee attacks. Aside from that, if we make an attack with a Kroot unit against an enemy unit that is below its starting strength, we get +1 to hit. And if that enemy unit is below half its starting strength, we will have not only +1 to hit, but also +1 to wound. This detachment makes sense, okay, because of course there's like a huge refresh on the Kroot range that we had recently. Just in case if you are curious, I made a video talking about every single new Kroot unit, so of course I'm going to leave the link in the description in case that you're curious. But it makes sense that if they make this big refresh, they want us to play these miniatures. So here we have a way of playing Kroot. Kroot are more focused, or at least a little bit more focused into close combat, so it's quite nice because they can complement and they can fit into this gap of the Tau that they don't have like proper close combat units. And even if this detachment is purely focused into the Kroot, the army rule of the Tau is still present, so of course we can get Tau units here. But even if we can get Tau units here, we should only get the units that can work on their own. And most of the time we just want to have the ones that probably are the most broken in game, because everything is focused into the Kroot, so we are going to have like a lot of Kroot. At least we need more than half of our army to be purely Kroot if we play this detachment. But of course that doesn't mean that, for example, we can have, let's say, more than half of our army consisting in Kroot units, and then we can have, for example, a Skyray tank or a Hammerhead tank, because those ones by themselves they have access to rerolls, so they can work on their own, and maybe we can have something that will be guiding those ones, so we can still have a portion of our army dedicated to pure Tau shooting, and then most or the core part of our army consisting in basically Kroot. So basically, if we want to play this, we just need to get all the possible Kroots that are out there, make them the core of our army, and then just add Tau units that can work by themselves, or the most broken thing that exists right now in the shooting range of the army of the Tau. Personally, I like what they did with the Tau Codex, because the Tau Empire, they don't have like a huge range of miniatures, that's why we only have 4 detachments, but thanks to this, we can have these units working nicely in all of these detachments. I mean, let's put some examples. Let's say that I want to start a Tau army right now, and I like the Hammerhead tank because I think it looks cool, and I want to start my collection with that tank. Then after that I want to increase the army and I want to play in one of these detachments. It's okay because this tank is going to work in all the detachments. I mean, it's true that the first 2 detachments that we talk about, they are the best for this type of tank, but this tank can work in the detachment of the battle, or we can have this tank in the Kroot detachment, because the Kroot, they don't have things, nice shooting things like this proper tank, so it can work there as well. And as it has access to rerolls by itself, it will work on its own. Or for example, let's say that I like the Tau a lot and I want to have a commander with a unit of battlesuits. You can do that as well, because this is going to work in all the detachments. It's true that here there's one specific detachment for battlesuits, but there's 2 detachments in which the battlesuits will work quite nicely. Aside from that, we have the Kroot as well, that again, these battlesuits can fill a gap. They can work in... let's say that the Kroot don't have the equivalent of a Battlesuit, so we can put them there and they will work. So that's why I really like this codex, because I think that if we want to start a Tau Empire army, we just need to focus into the units that we like the most, because they should work nicely. Something that I will always recommend is to get the Warhammer 40k app, because even if there are some features there that are paid, we can still have access for free to the army building. So we can make our own list, we can take the detachment that we want, we can even choose enhancements, and then we can start putting the units that we want or what kind of army we want to assemble. So it's quite nice because we can see what we're having. It is quite nice because also we can go to a store or we can order something, we can build the units that we like, and then we can put them there in the army list, so we can see exactly how our army is looking, and that's always a huge advantage. The last thing that I would like to mention is that I really like the first two detachments because they allow you to take the core units of a Tau army, and then you can add more things to it, but you can decide if to have a much more aggressive playstyle or a more passive one. So it's quite nice because you can use the same army and play in two different ways, absolutely. So it's nice, I like that kind of options there. And as well, it's also nice to have like very thematic armies, like for example the Kroot or the Battlesuit, so it's nice to have different options. With all of this being said, I think that we mentioned everything. We talk about the combat patrol and if it's a good start or not. We talk about the different detachments and playstyles of the Tau, and we established that actually for this specific army we can get the units that we want and we like, and then we have detachments to play with them. Even if they are completely different, they can work together. So with all of this being said, as usual, you can let me know in the comments your opinion or what you think or how you will start a Tau army, or if you like or dislike the Tau or whatever you want, because the comments are for that. So, as always, if you're still here, please consider giving me a like and subscribing. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.